Welcome, you're on The Fringe Show. I'm your host, Tatiana Zalan, and I go live every Friday, Dubai time at 2 o'clock. Why should you be listening to The Fringe? The Fringe helps you to understand and to navigate the rapidly changing world and increase the odds of your success. Here we discuss technology startups, entrepreneurs, and mental models of successful people so that you too can take advantage of the opportunities in the new digital world. Today it's 18th episode and we're going to talk about how the world will look like in 2030. And it's probably this type of episode would most suited for business people, for entrepreneurs who would like to understand where the world is heading, particularly post-pandemic. When I teach executives and senior managers, generally speaking, we go sometimes with them through the so-called scenario planning exercises and to construct really good scenarios about your future, which are credible and understandable and quite visionary as well. Then it's probably you need to understand all the trends and events that are going to occur in 5 years' time or perhaps 10 years' time. And this is what we're doing today. Today, I'm going to talk about how powerful global organizations such as the World Economic Forum or WEF see the world in 2030 and beyond. So it's mainly the ideas that are coming, not mainly, but really most of the ideas are coming from the World Economic Forum. Let me remind you that it's a live show, so please allow Facebook to identify yourself so that I can probably comment on your comments and respond to them in due time. One disclaimer here, I'm not your financial investment or health advisor, and this show is just for informational and educational personally only. Today, because I will be quoting a lot of documents, I've got my quotes and books and magazines as well. So let's get started. Firstly, we need to understand who are the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and why we should be listening to them. The World Economic Forum is a rather old organization. It's a non-government organization, not for profit. It was established in 1971 in Switzerland by Klaus Schwab. This foundation is mostly funded by big companies. It's got 1,000 members, and mostly large corporations with revenues in excess of $5 billion, and some public institutions, public subsidies. Their mission, explicit mission, is to improve the state of the world by engaging business, political, academic and other leaders of society to shape global, regional and industry agendas. They believe that in a globalized world, it's best to manage it through a coalition of multinational corporations, governments and societal organizations, civil organizations. It carries out a number of initiatives, and one of them is the so-called Great Reset, and we will be talking about Great Reset as well. Interestingly enough, they have a very popular program. It's called the Young Global Leaders Program for those leaders who are under the age of 40, and that's designed to shape the mindset of these leaders so that they can contribute to shaping the future of their respective countries. That group of young global leaders consists of people who are chosen by the WEF, and they are representative, according to the WEF, of contemporary leadership from different sections of society. Some of the notable members and alumni include very famous politicians like Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, Emmanuel Macron, includes leaders of tech companies like Sergey Brin and Larry Page of Google, Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Ma. Entertainment is also part of them, leaders in entertainment like Ashton Kutcher, the actor, and civil rights activists, like, for example, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Alicia Garcia. The Great Reset, let's talk a little bit about the Great Reset. It is an initiative which was launched in response to the pandemic crisis. And according to Klaus Schwab, it's a direct quote from him, the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. There was actually a whole issue in time that was dedicated to that particular agenda. As you can see, it's called Great Reset, and that's an issue from November 2020. Interesting enough, in preparation for maybe some of the challenges of that our society faced in 2020, on 18th of October 2019, the World Economic Forum, together with Johns Hopkins University and the Gates Foundation, organized a high-level pandemic exercise, which was called Event 201. And the purpose of this exercise was to identify the critical gaps in global pandemic preparedness. So the theme, the Great Reset itself, was taken or borrowed from a very critically acclaimed book by Richard Florida, which came into being after the global financial crisis in 2008. The agenda itself has three main components, and that's straight from the documents. The first one is how to steer the market towards more fairer outcomes. And to this end, they're saying the governments should improve coordination, for example, in tax, regulatory, and fiscal policy, upgrade trade agreements, and create the conditions for a stakeholder economy. That's the first component. The second component of the agenda is related to investments, and in particular, they're encouraging governments to make investments that advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. And a big part of this urge and this investment is, for example, building green urban infrastructure and creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on environmental, social, and governance metrics. So that's agenda now, or component number two, which is clearly related to climate change and green initiatives. And the third and final priority of this Great Reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the fourth industrial revolution to support the public good, especially by addressing health and social challenges. And generally speaking, this fourth industrial revolution is a big theme in everything that Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum are talking about. They're saying that the first, and we know this from history, that the first Industrial Revolution used water and steam power to mechanize production. The second Industrial Revolution used electric power to create mass production. Then the third revolution came about. It used electronics and information technology to automate production. And now we are facing a fourth Industrial Revolution, and it's building on the third revolution, which is around digital, but it has also new components. It's characterized more or less by an integration or a fusion of technologies that are blurring the line between the physical, the digital, and biological spheres. And they're saying that the speed, the breadth, and the depth of this revolution is forcing us to rethink how countries develop, how organizations create value, and even what it means to be human. They elaborate on the Great Reset, on the fourth industrial revolution even further. And let me just maybe point your attention to what other technologies that, according to them, will be underpinning the fourth industrial revolution. Not surprisingly, it's AI, it's robotics, it's media and culture, that comes in here as well. It's blockchain. A lot of my shows are dedicated to blockchain, so I encourage everyone to go and learn about blockchain, what it means. Drones, 5G, digital identity. I also have a show on digital identity. My last show was about Facebook's DM Association and what they're trying to do with digital identity. So it's a range of technologies and tech and data and communication and 3D printing and so on and so forth. They're also discussing what impact these technologies, fourth industrial revolution, is going to have on businesses and on us humans. And let me maybe just couple of sentences here from the documents where they're saying that on the whole, there are four main effects of the fourth industrial revolution that has on business, on customer expectations, on product enhancement, on collaborative innovation, and on organizational forms. And they're going on to say that the bottom line, however, is that the same business leaders and senior executives need to understand their changing environment, challenge the assumptions of their operating teams, and relentlessly and continuously innovate. So that's from the documents. Now, what do they actually think about 2030, where the world is going, what's their agenda and their vision? They make 8 very bold predictions, and these predictions can be found anywhere and on their websites, but there is also a very short YouTube video which is dedicated to these predictions. It's from July 2021, sorry. So that's pretty new. So the first one, and this is addressing young people. So if you're a young person, it's designed for you. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Whatever you want, you'll rent, and it will be delivered by drones. Number 2 is that the US will cease to be an economic or major leading economic superpower, and a handful of countries will dominate the new landscape. Then they're saying that you won't be waiting for an organ donor if you need an organ donation, because that will be printed using 3D printing. You will eat much less meat, only as an occasional treat, and for the good of the environment and your own health. I have a whole episode that's dedicated to lab-grown meat, which fits very neatly into this 2030 agenda. They also predict that billions of people, or billion people, will be displaced by climate change. And so we as a society, global society, will need to do a better job at welcoming and integrating refugees. They're also saying that polluters will have to pay their share for emitting carbon dioxide, and there will be a global price on carbon, and that will make fossil fuels history. You could also be preparing to go to Mars, and scientists will have figured out how to keep you healthy in space. The start of the journey, that will be a start of the journey to maybe find some alien life out there. And finally, they're saying that Western values will be tested to the breaking point, and checks and balances that underpin our democracies need to be there in place. It's interesting who are the partners of this in this vision. The partners are large companies and governments. For example, Amazon Web Services, Botswana government is there, Cisco, Facebook, Google, Huawei, consulting firms like McKinsey, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Salesforce and SAP. So that these are major shapers, movers and shakers as well. They've recently also launched a new initiative in order to support the travel and hospitality industry that suffered a lot during the pandemic. And what they're suggesting is that they're supporting and funding a blockchain-based COVID pass. There is a video on YouTube, which is very, very recent. You can have a look at that. So it's blockchain-based, and it's a pass so as to keep you safe. Now, if you're an entrepreneur in a travel and tourism industry, maybe you should be paying attention. Human augmentation seems to be a large part of this agenda as well, or the vision of the future. And one of the best persons to talk about it was Yuval Noah Harari, who is a Israeli intellectual. He's also a professor, a philosophy professor, and last year he talked at the regular Davos summit. Every year, the World Economic Forum would hold a summit in Switzerland, in Davos, and a lot of people, corporations, non-government organizations, and governments will come and see what's the future like, and to sort of network and understand where the world is going. So he gave a very interesting talk, and that talk you can find on YouTube as well, How to Survive the 21st Century. And he typically talks about familiar existential threats to the humanity in the form of the nuclear war and ecological collapse. I've got his book, by the way, here that I would like to flag. He is a best-selling author. He published Sapiens and Homo Deus. I personally own this book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. So in his YouTube talk, apart from this nuclear war and ecological collapse as major existential threats, he also adds technological disruptions. And basically this technological disruption, in his vision, boils down to a formula, and the formula or simple equation is B multiplied by C multiplied by D is equal to AHH. Let's unpack this formula. What does it mean? B stands for biological knowledge, multiplied by C, computing power, multiplied by D, which is data, and so you are able to hack humans. So AHH stands for ability to hack humans. What he's saying clearly here is an ever-increasing integration between technological systems and human systems. And in that new world, technological systems are guiding and controlling and monitoring humans rather than vice versa. By the way, it's not really a very new idea, and it's been around for quite some time. There was even a special symposium, or a special issue rather, dedicated to that in a very leading journal, Technological Forecasting and Social Change. So I'm just drawing on some of the ideas here as well, because they resonate with what Harari and the World Economic Forum are saying. And if successful, this mission of will turn humans from individuals in the traditional sense into knots of global intelligent network that's similar to the global brain. And this is exactly what this article by Stephen Ross is saying. And let me just read out a couple of things here that I think they're quite interesting. What they're saying in this merging of humans and technologies, eventually we may even reach a point where it will be impossible to disconnect from this all-knowing network even for a moment. Disconnection will mean death. If medical hopes are realized, future people will incorporate into their bodies a host of biometric devices, bionic organs, and nanorobots, which will monitor our health and defend us from infections, illnesses, and damage. And they go on and saying, if I don't update my body's antivirus program regularly, I will wake up one day to discover that the millions of nanorobots coursing through my veins are now controlled by a North Korean hacker. So that might happen according to this vision. Now, transhumanism and human augmentation is a really big issue today. There is a lot of interest into that, and the Pope himself is hosting a conference on transhumanism this very weekend in the Vatican. And let me just give you another one more illustration and one more technology, what's happening and what people are working on as far as human augmentation goes. And that's from a group of MIT researchers and their published paper. It's a bit of a mouthful. Let me read this out, the title of the paper, which was published in Science Transnational Medicine. And the paper is called Biocompatible detectable near-infrared quantum dots delivered to the skin by microneedle patches record vaccination. So these patches that you can put on your skin and they dissolve or can be used to store your medical history and to store your vaccination history. And they're just really like QR codes, and this is how I see them. And this is what they're saying in this paper, that this approach will help to encode medical history in a patient using the spatial distribution of biocompatible near-infrared quantum dots in the dermis. Quantum dots are invisible to the naked eye, yet detectable when exposed to near-infrared lights. They finish off this abstract on the article that these findings suggest that intradermal QDs can be used to reliably encode information and can be delivered within a vaccine, which may be particularly valuable in the developing world and open up new avenues for decentralized data storage and biosensing. So we will be carrying our own biomedical information in all these patches and QR codes. Now, this technology hasn't been tested on humans, and the article itself is from 2019, but from my understanding, they were going to conduct surveys to assess whether these invisible tattoos will be acceptable by local populations around the globe, and they're targeting developing countries in particular, because this is where medical records are not particularly very accurate. Some are paper-based, they may be lost, and so on. It's funded by the Gates Foundation, and they're starting to conduct various kinds of surveys in Asia, countries like Bangladesh, but also in Africa, in Malawi, and in Benin and Kenya. Not sure what's happening there, but it's probably going ahead. And just to wrap it up, I want to pose a few questions to you. If you're business leaders, if you're entrepreneurs, how do you think these trends and technologies, as predicted by the World Economic Forum, will impact your business? For example, how will you adapt your business model to the world where most people will be displaced by technological change and automation? Most people may only exist on universal basic income, which is talked about a lot by the World Economic Forum as well. How do you see your business addressing the stakeholder model of capitalism? How do you see your business and your bottom line if they indeed introduce a global climate or fossil fuel tax? If you're, say, a restaurant owner or maybe a food chain owner, how will you ensure that your food supply, your food supply, if all this meat is lab grown, do you have a source of supply? And how will you or your business participate in the fourth industrial revolution, and in particular in this component where they put such a huge emphasis on, which is human augmentation or transhumanism? Please let me know. I would be really interested to see what ideas you have and how you would answer some of these questions. Thank you for joining. I shall see you on the Fringe Show next Friday, 2 p.m. Dubai time. Now it's time for some music.